What's up, Yap Squad? Welcome to the final Re-Yap of the Acolyte. I'm Sawyer. I'm here with my bestie Brooke, and we have two wonderful guests with us tonight for our discussion. Let's all introduce everybody. Natasha, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here for the last little mini app sesh for this particular conversation. I'm a fan. I have been on the pod before, and yeah, I'm just really excited to dig into this conversation today.
Welcome back.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I'm Savi. I am at Enderisms on Twitter. It's my first time on the pod. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I loved this last episode, so I'm really excited to yap about it with you guys.
Yay. Honestly, I was like, I saw your tweets about it, and I was like, oh, we need to have her on, talk about it.
Yes.
And I feel like Savi has been in the trenches of shipping for this show since the beginning.
Mhm.
So we can talk about the progression and you. I've seen some of your tweets about that specifically, Natasha, as well. So we can get into that because this is a panel of Oshimir shippers for sure. That I can pretty much guarantee you. We usually have an outline. We decided we were just gonna yap with y'all for an hour or so tonight, but I can guarantee you that is on the menu for this evening. So so we have been doing this in 2-episode doses. So we can talk about episode 7 and episode 8. But does anyone have like a first thought that they want to bring up for this? Or we can talk about the whole season too, right? I mean.
Yeah.
Savi, do you want to go first? I honestly, I would love. I've been talking so much about the show. I want to hear other people's thoughts.
No, I totally feel that. We just recorded our last episode review as well on our podcast, and then we just did another one yesterday on another podcast. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what else is there to say? But I guess my first thoughts was I loved the open ending, but also it was such a comfortable close to this season. I was telling my co-host about this, but I loved that you kind of didn't know whether it was like a sunrise or a sunset. And it was Chimere and Osha like looking out upon it onto this horizon of not knowing like where the future is going to take them. So I am really excited to see. Hopefully they do a season 2. I think that's really my first thought was that I'm just so excited to see like what's going to happen for this couple.
Yeah. I mean, I +1 on pretty much everything you just said. I love that sunset sunrise thing. That's really beautiful. I really was going in with a little bit of stress going into this episode being like, oh my God, what if they don't actually find a way to wrap this up in a way that like makes sense or feels good? And I just think it was, kudos to Leslie and the entire writers team, the directorial team, and really ending this show in a way that just felt like, it felt so earned, everything that we got at the end. And like you said, it just like left so much more to explore. I feel that it's really hard to do those kinds of open-ended like endings and to do them well without leaving too much of like, well, why didn't you answer this? Or like, now I have to wait like X amount of however long time for, my answers on whatever thing. But I think they ended it really well. Obviously, the Oshimir of it all was absolutely a dream. And Osha in particular, her whole journey of finding belonging was so pivotal in this of this season, and this last episode working for me, and her being able to like find that sense of belonging finally in Chimere. And Chimere vice versa, finding that belonging with her was just I could go on and on, but just beautiful ending. Perfect. 10 out of 10. No complaints.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people talking about this sunrise or sunset kind of ending, and how most of if you look at the Star Wars films, most of the films that have a like lighter tone end with this like beautiful sunset, besides like Revenge of the Sith, which is a pretty darker toned movie, still ends with that sunset. But I love that this is like, it is a show that is focused on someone's descent into darkness, but it's shown in a light that's almost positive for our protagonist's like character growth in a way that we haven't seen before. Because when we see like Anakin's descent to darkness, it's very much framed as this is a negative, this is wrong, this is not a good thing. But then you look at Osha's story and you're like, yeah, I understand why she feels this way. And then so to end on this like beautiful sunrise or sunset is like so interesting to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's kind of been interesting just in the fandom over the past week since the finale. You know, like for me, that this was marketed as a Sith show. This was marketed as being written by someone. I mean, Leslie Headland has long since been a fan of the Sith and has said that in pretty much every interview she did leading up to the show. And to me, it seemed pretty obvious that we were gonna, the Sith were gonna win in some way, or the bad guys who we traditionally perceive to be the bad guys in Star Wars were going to win the day, in more or less. And I saw some discourse about that online, like, the bad guys won, the bad guys, but I think that this show does such a beautiful job of. I tweeted something yesterday, like, the Jedi and the light side of the Force are not synonymous, and the Sith and the dark side of the Force are not synonymous. And I didn't mean that the Jedi do not predominantly use the light side of the Force and don't use the dark side. That's not what I meant. I guess what I was getting at is like there is a gray area, and I'm not saying that there's gray Jedi. There's just a gray area in the way that the Force, what the balance of the Force really looks like. And I guess I'm of the opinion that Osha and Chimere are like, I don't know if the Sith is really where they align themselves in the way that we traditionally think of the Sith. But yeah, I just think the show did kind of the same way that The Last Jedi. I feel that both of these projects very eloquently show us the intricacies of the Force and the different ways in which the good and the bad can translate into a real person's life, because nobody's real life is that black and white,
Yeah. I think what's really interesting to me about the show, and just sort of the grayness that you're talking about, is I was on Podwans as well talking about this like a few days ago, and one of the things that I really wanted to highlight in that conversation is the show was really not interested in giving you sort of a simple framework around, oh, this person is like a good person, or like this person is like a bad person. Like the show was not actually interested in investigating people like that. I think that people made a lot of choices that either had negative or positive impact on themselves or the people around them, and people were making choices based on whatever level of sort of morality or life code that they that they felt moved by their experiences, whether those things were a trauma response or whatever it was. But the show wasn't really giving you anything simple like, I think beyond even Osha and Chimere, even when we talk about a character like Soul, and I can't even get too deep into that because I could talk about my feelings about Soul for like 5 hours, which I pretty much did the other day. But I think that when we look at characters like Soul, when we look at, the majority of characters, and Dara, whoever we're talking about, like, the show is looking at the lens of choice and like how our experiences and our trauma informs our choices. And it's not painting anybody with like a broad brush like that. And I really, 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 really love that. And that's an incredibly challenging thing to do. But the writing on the show, I know people have felt weirdly overly critical about the writing in the show, but I actually think the writing of the show is pretty brilliant.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think in specific, the writing of these characters is so strong. And I've said this a million times and I keep saying it, I've been on a couple of different podcasts this week, and this, I think, a pretty standard across all Star Wars podcasts. They'll ask you like, oh, who's your favorite character in all of Star Wars? And until 2 weeks ago, I would have said it was Ben Solo, because my favorite character has been Ben Solo for years. But in just the past 3 weeks, that answer has become Chimere, just because of how two-dimensional, or even Manny did an interview today where he said he thinks there's 3 different, very individual facets of Chimere, one of which we haven't really explored yet. It's been a really long time since any character in fiction has grabbed me the way that the writing of his character has done. And I feel like I haven't even sat on it long enough to understand why that is, or perhaps we just haven't had the chance to explore his character enough. But I can just tell you that there's just something that pulls me in that's like, wow, yes, of course, Manny is gorgeous and he plays the role of the dark side seducing very well. But that's not what it is. It's like there's just something about his character and all of the very intentional choices that were made to create him that have got me completely invested. And it's something that I'm familiar with in the High Republic. I think the High Republic does a great job of treating all of its characters very well, even the side characters, even the characters that do not last very long in those books. I think that they all have left an impact in one way or another. So.
Well, I personally, like, to go almost exactly off of what you said, I have noticed that a lot about Chimere that is different from other Sith characters that we've seen is that there is almost something kind about him. Like, he has this very welcoming, kind aura that is not only pulling Osha in, but it's also pulling us as an audience in. Mm-hmm. And he is giving Osha a choice, and he is kind of standing in the background, and he's letting her have all of these moments, these pivotal moments in her life. Especially, I want to call out the part where, if you noticed in the final episode, he is letting Osha confront Soul alone, essentially. He is standing in the background, like it's her moment to confront her past and talk to her master about this and ultimately make the decision whether to kill him or let him go back to the Jedi. And I love that about Chimere, is that he's like, I'm laying this all out on the table for you. Like, this is my spiel. This is what I think. But ultimately, like, it's up to you whether you want to join me. And I love that about him. Like, I think that that's such a it's such an intimate decision for Osha to make, and he is approaching it in such a way. So I to go off of what you said, like I love him so much too. Like, he has a gentle aura, I think.
And go ahead, Brooke. I don't think any of it's like fake. Like, it all seems very genuine.
It does,
coming from him. And like Brooke here says, it's disarming because you expect him to be bad all the time. And it does remind me a little bit of Ben Solo as a character, because you can tell the moments when he's being like genuine in those movies, and the times where he's like clearly has like a mask on, whether that be a physical mask or metaphorical mask. And I think we've seen a lot of moments in this show with Kymir's character that there's no one else around, and he doesn't have this mask up, right? You can see that these genuine moments, like when we first see him at the end of episode 5 with Osha, she is completely passed out. He has no reason to be gentle with her because there's no one else around, and yet he still chooses to like handle her with care. And then we see it again even in the finale when Vernestra is like, he's like, he puts his helmet on like a scared little boy. Like there is something about him that is like gentle in a way. And I'm so interested in seeing more of that, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think, it's been great debate on the internet as to whether or not this is a character who is manipulating Osha. And I think that it's an understandable conclusion to draw based on the past, based on what we've seen before in the Star Wars universe, but also in other franchises. And it's an understandable guard to kind of put up when it comes to like, okay, he's a villain. They make a very intentional point of having him be as brutal as possible, possibly more brutal than anything we've seen in Star Wars before in episode 5. And then he's masked off, and it's like, oh my God, it's you. It's the weirdo from the apothecary. And I get the apprehension, and I get the morality of like, well, he's the bad guy. He killed all these people. He did. However, I don't think that part of him is any less genuine than the softer side of him. And I think that something that's very, Leslie's talked a lot about. She's done several. I shout out to Leslie Headland for confirming the ship, validating the ship, encouraging the ship. That's been super lovely. But she said that she didn't want to. Yes, there's probably tragedy involved in whatever this love story ends up being, but she also said that doesn't mean they're going to fail as a team. And I think that to me, something that is very core to Kymir's character is that he values companionship. He seeks companionship, which is very anti-Sith. It's one to hold the power, one to crave it, but like he wants an equal, he wants an other. And I think that we see that so well illustrated at the beginning of the finale when Osha puts the helmet on and she gets stuck in her mind because she hasn't been in tune with the Force for so long. Like that's concern. That the way that he reaches out, the way that he's like, Osha, like he cares for her. And that feels very real. That feels, I can't believe I'm saying this, but it feels more real than Ben's care for Rey a little bit. I'm going to put it on the record here. I think I like Osha Mir more than I have ever loved Reylo. And Reylo has been my lifeblood for many, many years.
You heard it here first, y'all.
Wow. I never thought I would hear that. That's big. I feel so excited that I was here to actually see that live. I agree with all of that. I will say that Kymir's emotional intelligence is like at an 11 compared to what we typically see in Star Wars and compared to pretty much almost anybody on this actual show that we were watching. And I think that he is very emotionally honest, like from the get-go with Osha. And I mean, in some ways, he's not really in a position where he can be dishonest because she has already seen him at his absolute worst. Where else can he go but to just be fully honest and open with her? It's why I really, again, like I agree, I understand where people were coming from with like the discourse around like the manipulation, but I just don't think that that's true. I just don't see their relationship that way, because he's not only honest with her, he constantly puts himself in a position where she can be or feel as safe as possible. The way that he never really, especially in like the infamous episode 6, he like always has his back to her, for a lot of the time. Never is really armed, even like puts himself in a position openly where she like can just take his weapon and use it in any way that she chooses. He gives her options to leave. I mean, he creates a scenario where she has every opportunity to make the best possible choice for herself. And I think that's so important in the context of this show, because throughout the course of Osha's journey, she just keeps having choices taken from her over and over and over again. Which is why it was so incredibly important for, at the end, for her to be able to make these choices when it came to Soul, when it came to choosing to go with Chimere. And I really love that for her. That moment that May and Osha, kind of have their last conversation before they're separated again, and she asks Osha, "What do you want?" That just isn't something that Osha has been presented with in a way that has been manipulated. And again, we are not going to be here long enough for me to get into the soul like aspect of this relationship, but I will just say that when you look at how Chimere treats her with like respect, openness, honesty, choice, compared to how Soul treats her, it is wild. Like, he doesn't really give her choices. She doesn't really, he's the one that kind of decides when they make their connection or whatever on Brendock, that like, this is going to be my Padawan. And every single thing that he does is to that end, no matter how it impacts anyone around him or anyone else. And really, and really getting to see the difference between Chimere and Soul, especially compared to how people were viewing those two characters, perhaps in like episode 5 compared to like where we ended the show, is again one of the best writing decisions I have ever seen in Star Wars or anywhere, period. And how that felt so real and natural. And when you go back and look at the context of the show from the beginning, now knowing this, it changes the entire landscape of the show, which I really, 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 really love.
Yeah. I don't know. I would love to read your manifesto if you're gonna put one out there, Natasha. But no, I mean, I think it's worth at least discussing Soul a little bit, because he is a major part of the finale and he's a major part of the story. And I think you make a really great point, Natasha. Everybody was feeling everybody, including people who weren't necessarily fans of the show as a whole, were feeling a certain way about Soul by the time episode 5 rolled around. And then, of course, we started to get a little suspicious about what was going on with his character and what the truth was. But it wasn't until episode 7, and then by extension, the finale, that we were able to kind of settle and realize that, because I think a lot of us knew going into episode 7, like, okay, something bad happened. The Jedi are probably at fault for something, and Soul is not being honest. And No, I am glad that you feel so passionate about it, because I feel like, well, after watching episode 7, I had this really gross taste in my mouth for him. And I
Yeah.
was seeing a lot of people online, and I get it. I think that the performance is phenomenal. I think Soul as a character is fantastic, just in his story. Same way that I feel about Kiner, just every choice worked for me. But yeah, I was seeing a lot more support for him than I was seeing people go, because it wasn't even the, I mean, yes, he impulsively kills Anastasia, and that's like, whoa, okay, bad move. But for me, it was his choice to leave May that made me feel so like, I don't like, I yes, it's not black and white. None of this is black and white, but it's just like, there was just something so gross about it. And I feel like they did a really good job of emphasizing that all of his actions were from this like selfish,
Yeah.
twisted idea that he saw this little girl and he was like, that one, I want that one. That one's mine. Like, that's
That whole episode really had me kind of speechless, because at the beginning I noticed that Indara and Soul have this conversation about how she has a Padawan and Soul doesn't. And
Yep.
then yeah, literally moments later he is approaching this tree with two young women underneath the tree, and or 8-year-olds underneath it, not young women, they're 8. And wonder if he had kind of a moment of almost like an epiphany. Sorry, hopefully you can't hear the car that is driving by really annoying and loud. But I feel like he kind of had this moment of epiphany where he's like, the Force kind of just showed me this potential Padawan, and I see her wielding the Force, and he all of a sudden now has this idea in his own head, this very selfish idea that he's like, okay, well, this is going to be my Padawan. Like, there's no way that this couldn't just be a coincidence. So I love how they wrote him to just be so insistent, even all the way up to the end of his life. Like, literally up to the moment that he took his last breath, he was so insistent that his truth was the truth. And that was his downfall, I think, was that he wasn't willing to accept that he made a mistake, which was the sad part of his character.
You know what really shocked me, to be honest? Like, and I will say this, I started having a bad taste in my mouth about Soul back in episode 4. That was when I started to feel like, not to this extent. I did not predict that he had done anything like this. But like the 4th episode was when I really started to like, my brow was raised when, Osha really attempted to just get away from this whole situation. She was like, you know what? This is the Jedi's issue. I don't really want to deal with this. Like, I'm clearly not ready to confront my sister because, like, I just saw what happened, and like, I don't want to put myself in this position anymore. And he really manipulated her into like coming on that mission with him. And that was kind of the moment I started to feel like something more unsavory than just like, oh, like the Jedi made like I started to feel like he probably had some significant role in it. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. What really shocked me, even though I had been sort of suspicious of him since episode 4, everything that was revealed in episode 7, when we got to episode 8, I genuinely thought, even then, like, he's going to apologize to this person. There's no way he is going to just stand there and be like, I'm standing on business. That's right. I did this thing. And like, and the fact that he showed up in the way that he did with May, he was completely unapologetic, showed no empathy, no kindness towards her. It was just this mask of the empathetic, kind master that we had been seeing throughout the course of this show was completely gone. And he really and when he took it a step further, to actually try to blow up her escape pod was I don't know. Anyway, I was just I was very, very, very surprised that not that he was just stubborn, but he was so completely committed to this idea that he was right no matter what, and everything that he was doing was like for like the betterment of this this belief that he had. And the fact that, you know, he couldn't even express any level of wrongness to OSHA in those last minutes. Yeah, it just was, it's very tragic. I can definitely say that it was very tragic, but yeah, that actually shocked me a bit.
Yeah, I was definitely shocked when, like, literally all the way up until the end, he was just like trying to over explain himself and not even showing a little bit of empathy for how May is feeling and how OSHA might be feeling over this news, because I feel like it doesn't matter if you think what you did was the right thing to do. If it hurts somebody else,
Yep.
there should still be empathy and an apology there, you know? And the fact that there wasn't all the way up until the end that was like really shocking to me. And if we go back to episode 7, honestly, what was more shocking or what was more icky to me about Soul's choices was not even like, I feel like the big shock value of the episode was him having killed their mother. But that part like wasn't even the most shocking. The most shocking to me is when he chose OSHA over May. Like that one made me like really mad. I was like, dude, you could have easily probably saved both of them, because we've seen Jedi do more with the Force. Like, I feel like there was some level of like, even whether it was conscious or not, of like this selfish choice. And it does remind me a little bit, and it's hard because after watching episode 7, it reminded me a little bit about like Luke in The Last Jedi and how he made this like brash decision to light up his lightsaber, and it made Ben think that he was going to kill him, and then he admits he regrets it later on. But then going into episode 8, and we don't see Soul express any kind of remorse. He just keeps being like, no, what I think I did the right thing. And that was I think, yes, all of that together was like the craziest part.
And I think that there is something very interesting about, you know, because obviously this show has brought up a lot of conversations that we're used to having in the fandom, predominantly like whether or not the Jedi are the bad guys, which I think is a very jaded and incorrect take that requires a lot more nuance than just that, you know, that answer. But I think that, to be honest with you, I did not get the sense, like, of course, Torben, and I have to shout out Torben for a second, because that's a character that I really didn't really think, I had no feelings on until episode 7, and then I was just devastated for the way that
sweet
his
little boy
story
just wanted to go home.
I know.
But if you think about it, Indara, Kalnaka, Torben, none of them, they were all looking through from a very objective standpoint, like what is the best course of action. We're here to we're here to look at this divergence. Okay, now we know there's these twins that were probably like, something's weird with them. They have the same, I just have to say, they use the term symbiont. They have the same symbiont. That is not what that word means. As the scientist on the panel, that is not what that word means. But whatever.
Well, they knew they couldn't say clone, because then people would be up in arms.
Yeah,
like, you can't say clone. That's more sensitive.
I literally thought that too. I was like, they're staying away from that word at all, from all costs.
Absolutely.
Fair enough. But a symbiont is like a separate organism that is coexisting. Like, not exactly the correct word, but regardless, they have a discussion. They have dinner. They have a discussion, and they're like, okay, something's weird. The council is like, no, let's not take the everybody here. The Jedi were trying to not intervene, and it was Soul who couldn't. Soul took advantage of Torben in that
100%.
moment. So he absolutely, just the way, and I also really like that they, yes, he has this moment with Chimere in episode 5 where Chimere's like, I don't hide my darkness. What do you do with yours or whatever? But it wasn't darkness in the sense that he's like fallen to the dark side or dabbled with the dark side or anything like that. Like, Soul's darkness is just his selfishness and his very narrow-minded view of the way that things should be. And I think that was really interesting because I think, Yapsesh was on the Darth Soul train for a little bit. And I think that would have also been a very crazy reveal. But I think I like this more. I mean, like it wasn't actually the dark side that was his downfall. It was his hubris. It's a fantastic foreshadow to what happens to the Jedi in the prequels.
Oh yeah, that line. What is it that Mother Anastasia says to Soul? Oh, so good about like your whatever selfishness will be your downfall, and then like I saw someone make an edit and they just like cut to Revenge of the Sith, and I was like, damn, that's so good. I want to highlight this comment here because I actually feel the opposite. Because we saw in episode 7 Soul confuse Osha when it was actually May.
Yeah.
And it's a very important part of the difference between Soul and Chimere was that Chimere was always able, like from the first time he met Osha in episode, 2, when he was, little nerdy apothecary guy, he could differentiate between the two of them like immediately to where not in the same way that Soul could. I think in Soul's mind he had this strong connection to Osha, but I think episode 7 kind of highlighted that he refused to like acknowledge that there was also this connection to this person that has a lot more outward darkness in them, which finding out in the finale that it's like something that Osha always had in her as well, but because of this idea of the Jedi serving the light, I don't think it was something that he was like accepting or was like maybe subconsciously repressing the like connection to that darker side to both of them, whereas like Chimere knew it was Osha from the beginning and always treated her and even told her like, no, you're not your sister, despite them being the same person.
Yeah.
It's
and
weird.
like
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, and not just that, like in episode 6 he is with May that whole time on the ship, and he at no point does he realize it is May. Oh my gosh, what's the cute little guy's name?
Basil,
thank you. Shout out to Basil. Basil was really the one that figured it out, that sniffed it out, and like informed him of this, right? So like even in that context, even when he is spending concentrated time with her alone, he still couldn't tell the difference. And that's just, it's really, really important.
Yeah, I also want to go back even as far as episode 2, where I've already started a rewatch, but where I think it's episode 2 or episode 4. I cannot remember for the life of me, but Soul and Osha are speaking, and he says that he's made peace with what happened on Brendok, and then Osha says something along the lines of how he taught her something that helped her kind of get over or heal from what happened on her home planet. But I feel like, and to quote, I think it's Spider-Man, but it's like a relationship built off of dishonesty can't thrive or something like that. I can't remember the exact quote, but it's like that was such a perfect moment for Soul to kind of let his selfishness put his selfishness aside and his regrets and his no regrets and kind of talk to her. I think the one thing that the show really highlights is the dangers of miscommunication,
Yeah.
especially with somebody that you truly care about, because we know that Soul loved Osha in a very fatherly, protective, unhealthy way. He is exactly what the Jedi were warning the other Jedi about when it comes to attachments, which I think it was a really great way to look at it.
Yeah.
Where it's like, this is what happens when you allow yourself to get too attached. And it's like, this is the danger. Because there are healthy relationships, whether it be romance or familial or friendships in Star Wars that we've seen before, like Avar and Elzar and Anakin and Obi-Wan in their beginnings. So it's like, Soul, this could have been something so strong and so healthy if you had just been honest with not only yourself, but also with Osha. So it's like, man, he was his own downfall. His nobleness was his own downfall. He was like one of the first dominoes in what led to Order 66.
Yeah, absolutely. Shoot, I lost my train of thought. But yeah, I also think it's interesting too, because at the beginning of this whole show, we were like, oh, Soul reminds us of Qui-Gon, and then Lee Jung-jae was like, yeah, like, I was inspired by Qui-Gon, and it's like, oh, no, I actually think that perhaps the characters are foils of each other, because there is a lot of nobility to Qui-Gon, and there is that sense of, you know, I'm not on the council because I don't always agree with the council, but it isn't selfish. You know, I still believe that, you know, I think when I think back to the Phantom Menace and Qui-Gon's meeting Anakin, who was around the same age as Osha and May were, you know, there was a desire to save him from his situation for sure, but it was also, there was like a distinct recognition of his abilities and like his individual set, like who he was as a person. And I don't get the sense that Qui-Gon was like, yes, I had an epiphany, and this child is supposed to be my liege. Like, no, I think he was like, oh wait, actually, I'm the Force has brought me here for a reason, and this is that reason, and I would be doing myself a disservice if I did not see this through. And the Order a disservice if I did not see this through. And it's just, that's a whole essay in itself. Well, anyway, this wasn't supposed to be the Soul show. This was supposed to be the Ocean show.
I would love to talk about Vernestra for a hot second. Nick here commented, has anyone brought up Shady Vernestra? Honestly, like, when they announced that Vernestra was going to be a part of the show, I was so excited. I was like in the High Republic panel when they announced that. I was like crying. Everyone was like, it was such a cool environment to be around. I didn't know what to expect because this is such an older, wiser Vernestra. And really up until I think the last couple episodes, or I guess the finale, I was just kind of like not crazy about her character. Like, she was fine, but she was just like, I think it was, maybe it was JJ on Twitter was like, she's giving nothing. And I was like, kind of right about that. And I don't know if it's like how it's written or the performance or whatever, but like I actually enjoyed her character a lot more in the finale because we got to know more about her.
Yeah.
And then she actually got to, like, I don't know, do thing. Like, she had that conversation with the senator in the beginning, who was like coming for the Jedi's life, which was a really interesting conversation. And I think he said a lot of things that I feel like a lot of the audience was thinking, which I thought was really interesting. And I hope that we explore that more if we get a season 2. But then seeing that it was like, it's always the fucking green ones that decide I'm gonna cover this shit up. Let me tell you. But I don't know. How do you guys feel about what Vernestra decided to do in the finale?
You know, I feel like everyone has really taken like a position that's like anti-Vernestra, and it's fine. I'm gonna be here alone on the other side of this, defending her, and probably looking like a fool in 2 years when the next season comes out. But I think I am holding out a bit on judging what is happening right now, especially in the context of like the kind of show that we're watching. Because like I think that it feels like do I think that Vernestra is going to probably contribute to the level of hubris that the Jedi, the hubris journey they're on right now? Absolutely. I think pretty much at this point every Jedi is going to participate in that, especially a high-ranking Jedi like Vernestra. I think where I am at right now is I don't feel like I know enough about the current landscape of where we are in the time we're in to actually make a judgment on Vernestra right now. And I think one of the things that felt very, especially in rewatching the show and really paying closer attention to Vernestra, like whenever she pops up, so many of her decisions, and I would say almost all of them, are rooted in not sharing information specifically with the Senate. That always seems to be like her thing. It's even when it came to not sharing information with the High Council, her reasoning for that was, if we share this information with the High Council, it will get to the Senate. And it makes me feel like there is context that we are not fully seeing yet about where the Senate is and what the relationship between the Jedi Order and the Senate is right now. I think, yes, I am probably a little bit more in that mindset because I do have a little bit of like historical knowledge about like Vernestra, and I do feel connected to that character. But I I really do think that there is more context that I need in terms of like the socio-political, space that we're in right now, that this season really didn't share really at all. Like the show was like very interested in these just very interpersonal and kind of singular journeys. And I'm hoping that in season 2, when we're getting it, because that is the mindset I am going to be in, when we get season 2, I am hoping that we get to see more of that. And last thing I'll say about Vernestra is one of my hopes for Vernestra being on the show at all is to be sort of that connective thread between the High Republic books and where we are right now. And really, we just got very little historical context. They were like little Easter eggs, like if you read the books, like you would pick up on, but like not things that were in service to sharing with the audience that are unfamiliar with the books what has sort of been like the historical, placement of the High Republic, like generally. And I'm hoping that we get a lot more of that, like in future seasons.
Yeah. I have to agree with how you feel about Vernestra as well, especially because this is a Vernestra that is so different from the Vernestra that we know in the novels. I think that a lot of people who haven't read the High Republic and don't have that background on it is that Vernestra is, as of I think phase 3, is like 17 or 18 years old, and then add 100 years. I cannot imagine how much somebody's personality would change over that period of time. Vernestra has seen so much unfold within the Jedi Order that we don't know yet, but the stuff that we do know was incredibly traumatic and hard to go through. I also kind of want to quote this Leslie Headland interview where she said that Vernestra kind of became somebody that was what was kind of what she disliked as a kid. I think that's what was said, where it was like she kind of became this person that she never expected to become. So it's like this very interesting, I guess, appearance of Vernestra, but I do trust that in season 2 she's going to make things right. It's sad to see her in a way like dampen Master Soul's I guess reputation within the Jedi Order by saying that he did like commit mass murder, but I think that he would have had a downfall either way if he would have come before the council and like was honest. But I support Vernestra and all of her rights and her wrongs. So,
Me too.
Yeah, I think that also she. Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Okay. No, I think that she was presented with a very difficult choice because, you know, I think my only concern as to her deceit in the end of the finale is that she knows that her former Padawan is still around and in some way involved. And whatever transpired between her and Kymir, she knows that he was. It's an assumption, but I'm going to assume that she caught him dabbling in the dark side. I think that that's probably what happened. And so I do think it's an interesting choice to leave that out of the discussion. But I sympathize with her because Rayan Court is very anti-Jedi. She perceives that as a threat in the context of how the Jedi are perceived and are utilized by the Republic. And she wants to give the impression that everything's under control. So I do understand that, but I am interested. I feel that she is in some way about to embark on a very similar journey that Soul went on in this season, because Soul felt that it was his responsibility to deal with the you know, at first he thought it was Osha who was doing the killings, and then, you know, he felt responsible, but he never admitted it. But I think he did feel he felt at least enough guilt that he wanted Osha and May to be in the same room together for him to explain the truth, or whatever his version of the truth was going to be. But yeah, I think that Vernestra is now I feel like she feels some degree of responsibility, and she wants to go seek her former apprentice out and figure out what's going on there. So yeah, I don't know. But
I was just gonna add, like, I know when Leslie Headland when we were at Celebration and announced that Vernestra was going to be in the show, she, you know, applauded all of the authors of the High Republic for the story and the world that they've created, and that she wanted to honor that in some way, and picked Vernestra specifically as a character to be in the Acolyte. And now seeing the entire story and seeing Kymir as a character and knowing what some of the things that Vernestra has gone through in the books, that, like, I don't want to be like, oh, you have to read the books to understand her character, but because I don't think you do, but I think a lot of what has happened to her in the High Republic books, like, kind of informs what we're seeing now and her actions in the finale, because I think there is part of her that is still protecting Chimere in a way.
I agree.
And I won't spoil anything from the High Republic, but she has had similar experiences with other young Jedi dabbling in dark side behavior. And I think that informs this situation too. And knowing that, you know, it's something that has happened to her multiple times now, if Chimere was her Padawan and having to deal with that. And I think seeing the horrendous scar that was left on Chimere's back, it has not been confirmed in dialogue, but I think we can all but confirm that it has come from the lightsaber whip. I think we're filling in a lot of blanks here, obviously, until we get to season 2, but I would assume that she feels remorse over doing that.
Yeah.
And knowing that he's still alive, I can see that being a driving force to why she would want to keep the Republic or the government out of it until she can address it personally first. So I do agree. I think she is going on a similar journey, maybe as Soul. I can see it ending differently. I don't think that she's going to allow the same type of like selfish attachments like ruin her in the same way that Soul did, but I'm seeing a lot of those similarities.
And one last thing I'll say on this is like, I do, again, like we'll have to see where the narrative goes, but it is hard for me to believe that there isn't some part of her that is also trying to protect May too.
Oh,
She
yeah.
doesn't know the full context of what happened. And I'm pretty sure she knows that if she was just like, oh yeah, this is the person that murdered those 2 Jedi, you know, that we were searching for, and was like fully open about like who May is and like what she potentially has done, 1, she would get locked up, and 2, she would have no control over like figuring out like it's very clear to her that she saw like someone, probably she's inferred Chimere, wiped her mind. And I think that she is trying, I think there is some part of her that is trying to like help and protect her. And I'm actually really excited about like the prospect in a season 2 of seeing sort of like the dichotomy of like Chimere and Osha doing their thing over here, and Vernestra and May kind of doing their thing over here. And like I'm really interested in seeing like where they're going with that story. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm also really interested to see where they take not just May and Vernestra's story, but also I'd love to get some flashbacks or insights on what Chimere and Vernestra's relationship was like when they were Master and Padawan, because you know this isn't the first time that Vernestra has had a Padawan, you know, deal with the dark side. So it'll be interesting to revisit and see how, you know, if she brings up Emery and if she had other Padawans in between Emery and Chimere. So I don't know. I feel like whatever happened between the 2 of them, Chimere and Vernestra, I do feel like something had to have been justified enough for her to pull out her lightsaber whip. I am worried to see like how that came to be and what like triggered Chimere to fall to the dark side, essentially. Although I actually find it very interesting that that Vernestra says become evil instead of turn to the dark side. I don't know. It was a very interesting choice of words for a Jedi.
She also calls him her pupil and not like her Padawan or anything like that. So like it's really interesting. Yeah.
It's definitely an interesting choice of words, and I do feel like it is intentional. And maybe we'll eat our words, but I don't know. I feel like she's very secretive right now, so I do hope that we get a season 2. So we could get some answers from her.
I think it's coming. I think that they would. Yeah, I think it's in the works. I think it's been in the works. I think that I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic, but the amount of press that's been done, the amount of hype online, I think it's coming.
Let's hope so. Savi, I know you have to go, so if you have any last minute thoughts, and let us know where we can find you and your cool stuff. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I don't have any final thoughts, just that I love that this show was so different from what we've gotten, and how it was so diverse and open and willing to deliver such a nuanced story and characters to us as an audience, and the discussions that this show entailed I will miss so much, especially one like today. I never get tired of them. I mean, I've talked about the finale like 3 different times before this, and I'm gonna do it again tomorrow, and it still feels like a new conversation each time. But I love it. So thank you guys for having me. I'm a big fan of you guys, and it was really nice to meet you, Natasha. And you can find me at Andourisms on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. And then you can find my Star Wars podcast, Stardust Records, by that on Instagram and TikTok, just without the O and records. But yay, thank you guys so much again. It was great to see you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks for joining us. And
this was great.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye. Let me see. Can I there we go.
Oh, look at that. Amazing. Incredible.
Oh my God, we're back where we started with the Re-Yap.
I know, right?
Yeah, for those of you who are perhaps joining us for your first ever Yap Sesh experience, our first Acolyte Re-Yap was with our dear friend Natasha, and we yapped. It would be, I'm curious, I might have to go back and rewatch that for myself just to see where we were at the beginning of this show and where we are now. Because I think it's safe to say that at least all 3 of us were not expecting to get a couple of the things that we got out of this show.
Yeah.
Can I just say, like, it almost feels like I'm living in some sort of like dream world. Like, some of the stuff that we got in this show, in all of the best ways, feel like it came straight out of my brain if I were to like write a fan fiction.
Oh, 100%.
Can we talk about that?
Knowing that Leslie Headland like was a big like TTRPG player and wrote a lot of fan fiction, it came so clearly through the writing of this series. And I think fan fiction gets a lot of like kind of a bad rap, because it's a lot of like it's a lot of like amateur authors, right, who are writing fan fiction, but a lot of fan fiction authors or published authors started writing fan fiction, and it's a lot of like, oh, I didn't like this thing, so I'm gonna take it and fix it how I want it. But there's like such a beautiful world of fan fiction where there are so many amazing concepts that are a lot of like and other entertainment outlets don't always risk writing. I mean, Reylo in the sequel trilogy is a perfect example of the idea of something that could have been really, really great, but then not being executed not being executed because they didn't want to risk XYZ or whatever. And I feel like it was a big risk to do this sort of descent into darkness, but also wrapped in this kind of romantic undertone of it, and it being confirmed by like not only the showrunner but the actors. Like, it wasn't just something that we all made up in our heads. It was like, no, this was intentional. And I'm just like, especially after watching the finale, and just it's so good.
I think that, like, I'm so glad you brought this up, because I've been wanting to make a video about it, because episode 6 especially felt so fan fiction to me, in the sense that, first of all, I could tell a woman wrote it. Yeah. And second of all, I probably turned to my partner like 17 times in that episode and was like, that was an innuendo, right? Like, that sounded like an innuendo. And he was like, oh yeah, that was definitely an innuendo. And I was like, whoa, what the heck is going on here? Because we're just not used to that at all. But I just, like, I think that's part of why I feel so strongly about Oshimir as opposed to Raylo. Like, yes, it's wonderful to have the creator and both actors out there going, we love this, we support this, and we want to see it through in this way in another season. But then just, my favorite parts of Raylo have always been the fan projects, the art, the fan fiction, the role play, whatever it is. Yep. Because, I'm just somebody that if things don't go the way that I want them to go in fiction, I know that that's an outlet that I have where I can explore those possibilities. And that feels as real to me as what was actually presented to me in the official media. Mm-hmm. And I know I have friends, like JJ, she feels very differently. Like, that just doesn't do it for her in the way that it does it for me. I was always able to just, oh, okay, well, yeah, I hate the way that the Rise of Skywalker ended, but I can go read fan fiction. I can go write my own story. I can go play pretend and have control over it. And that doesn't work for everybody. But with Oshimir, it's like, we now are going to have probably like 2-ish years before another season comes out where the fans get to do that. They get to play, they get to do the art, the fan fiction, the whatever. But then we also kind of have, I don't want to say it's a promise because we don't even, we haven't gotten the confirmation of the season 2, but it is like an assurance to some degree that if there is a second season, it's not going to be like Loki season 1, and you can say whatever you feel about that particular show and that particular romance, but that was a very stark contrast between the 2 seasons of that. They were like starting to go in that direction in season 1, and then they were like, just kidding, we're going to pretend that never existed in the second season. And that's not what's going to happen, right? We have a whole team of people involved in this ship that are like, oh yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. And as a fan, as a woman, as a feminine presenting person who really values romance and really values that side of fantasy and science fiction, and we don't get to see that as often as I would like. It's very titillating, to use a $5 word. I'm so stoked about it. I'm so stoked to be involved in the fandom at this time. And I think, the things that I've seen from the Oshimir community already are much more welcoming and a lot less hostile than, even within the Raylo community, there is some interesting people having interesting conversations that I want no part of. But yeah, I don't know. I could talk about it for years.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And like, what is so interesting to me is like, one, I would not consider myself a Raylo. I appreciated that what Raylo brought us was like at least some crumb of romance into Star Wars, into live action Star Wars, which has just been starved for that for so long. And honestly, after seeing sort of the reaction and kind of like continued like weirdness that people have around Raylo, I've just for a long time I have felt like they're just never going to give us anything ever again, because people were so weird about this that like I just don't think that they are ever going to give us like any sort of romance and live action Star Wars ever again. And it has been very frustrating as a person who also really loves like romance and fantasy, that loves romantic tension. That is like a big driving force for like why I love the High Republic so much in the first place. It has been a continual frustration of mine to see that be so absent from like pretty much all live action content we have gotten from Star Wars for years and years and years now. And quite honestly, like as I was watching episode 6, I felt like I was gaslighting myself into being like, this isn't not happening. Like I was like, this is actually not happening because Star Wars doesn't operate that way. And I don't know what it was that finally I mean, the whole episode, the skinny dipping, all of it,
when he said, if you're not going to join me, I was like, he said what?
When he said, why do you want to be in relationship with people who aren't willing to go as deep as you? I was like, pardon?
Right?
And listen, I don't always pick up on that stuff. Like, you know, I'm very textbook autism in the way that I do not pick up on humor a lot of the time, and I don't pick up on puns and like innuendos and stuff like that. And even I mean, for me to be going like, wait, hold on, like, and also just Manny's delivery. And Leslie has talked about this a couple of times in interviews, like the way that he delivers those lines. Listen, I have watched enough episodes of The Good Place to have like, I was not familiar with your game, sir.
Wow. But yeah, I loved all of it, like the entire way that episode was constructed. Again, the way that they leaned into the romantic tension. You know, I think that there was such an intimacy between the two of them. And again, like we just don't really see that in Star Wars, even when there is some level of like, you know, a romantic sprinkle in there. Like it's not like that. That's not the kind of tension that we typically see. And like honestly, it's often not even really revisited in any sort of like, you know, meaningful way. And you know, we've seen tastes of that in, you know, animated Star Wars. You know, I mean, shout out to Kanan and Hera. They could have given us more of that too, but you know what? I will let that go for a conversation for another day. But yeah, I was just so pleased by that, and the fact that they gave us episode 6, but they continued that like in episode 8 was so great, because honestly, I really was ready for them to just sort of ignore the romantic tension in the last episode in service to like moving the plot along and other things and not going back to that. But the fact that like the episode, for all intents and purposes, we know what the actual real ending was. But like for all intents and purposes, the ending really was that that beautiful sunset sunrise, holding the hands over the lightsaber, and knowing, by the way, that like that moment was like Manny's idea, and the fact that like the actors on this show were able to be creative deciders in a lot of ways, on the direction and moments that their pivotal moments that their characters would have. Manny, I feel like in particular, has talked about that like quite a bit, and I'm sure that there are just other examples we don't even know about yet. But I really love how Leslie just had such a beautiful collaborative relationship with the actors on the show too, that they could deeply inform the direction of their characters. And that's how something like this happens.
Yeah. And I think it's just also like the level of trust that you have to have, because I know Leslie said in one of her interviews this past week, like, oh, when I gave episode 6 the script to Manny and Amandla, they both came to me and they were like, Leslie, like, but all of the conversation, everything that Amanda, Manny, and Leslie have said in the past week in their interviews about this dynamic and what they were aiming for, you know, it's like whatever kind of trust that was built is so special, and it is so cool to see that, you know, because Amanda is my generation. They are acutely aware of how people like Gen Z interacts with fandom, and probably how they in their own personal life interact with fandom, because I know that Amanda is a huge Star Wars fan. Like I always think about that interview that Amanda and Manny did, where Manny's like, oh, we got very close physically and emotionally. And Amanda's like, dude, why would you say that? And at first, my thought was like, oh, Amanda's thinking people are going to misinterpret this and you don't want that. And now I realize that they were actually going, don't spoil anything.
Yeah.
But, you know, Manny's like gung-ho. Manny name-dropped Reylo in an interview, which I thought was so interesting, because we've seen this more and more. You know, the Ahsoka cast was particularly involved in the Star Wars fandom, and still is, especially Iman Spandi. But also, you know, just like, that was weird to have a main actor be like, oh yeah, I know what's up. I pay attention. And I think we've seen that in other fandoms, but we haven't seen that in Star Wars so much. But this might just be my bias, just because I have my, you know, I love Manny. I think he's a phenomenal actor, and I think that he is incredible in the role, and I think he's incredible as a human being, so what I've seen so far. But he is a man, so I was waiting to see what Amanda said about the ship, because I think that she was going to offer a different perspective, perhaps. And I was like, okay, he's totally on board. How do they feel? And then Amanda's the same way. And it's like, what did she say? Like, oh yeah, I'm a Scorpio. Like, I'm all into it. I'm all into the romance. And I think that they also said something about Manny just being like a great scene partner and a great friend. And it's just so cool to see. You know, I have a couple friends who are like, oh, why are they talking about it so much? Just let the fandom do its thing. And I'm like, no. I think it's like it's the gaslighting, right? Like, that seems like an extreme term, but it's really serious. Like, you know, I think people, and a lot of people in fandom spaces, like to discredit what femmes value in fandom. Like, romance, Star Wars isn't about romance. First of all, that's a lie. Star Wars has always been about romance.
Yep.
Second of all, it's a very real part of fiction, and is it perhaps more femme-coded in a sense? Sure. But that doesn't mean it's less important. And I think that, you know, a Sith romance, I am so into that. I am so into the implications of that. I'm so into that, you know, I just, the whole, really, the thesis statement of this Yap that I'm doing right now is, please allow more women and femmes to write Star Wars stories. Please and thank you, Lucasfilm.
Please.
I'm, as we're talking about like Ocean Chimere as a ship, I'm like having an epiphany moment. And I realize, I think part of why I love their blossoming relationship, and I want to say I laughed because I tweeted immediately after the finale. I said, forget everything I ever said about what I feel about master apprentice relationships, because I'm making an exception. But to me, I think what as enemies to lovers as a whole, as a ship type or whatever you want to call it, what is so is what draws me in is that with Osha and Chimere specifically, Chimere respects Osha as a very strong and capable individual. And I think you can't be enemies without accepting that the other person is a formidable foe to you, and therefore accepting them on some level as an equal. Otherwise, you have this like, it's not the same enemies dynamic, right? Because you can see someone as being like inferior to you, and then you don't view them as a formidable foe. But when you have an enemies to lovers in this way, they're saying like, I see you as a very capable, strong person. And I think in the finale we saw, even through like just facial expressions and how Chimere was reacting to a lot of the things that Osha was saying and doing, was like, wow, this person has a lot of power. And I didn't get it in the way of like, how can I exploit this person's power? It was like, I want to help them unlock their greatest potential. And I'm so intrigued. And now that we know that, we haven't even brought him up, I don't think, that Plagueis exists, I'm so intrigued to see what Chimere's like real inner motivations are for being Sith, or what we, as he said, your idea of Sith. Because we know, as far as we can interpret from the Legends novels and from what Palpatine said about Plagueis in Revenge of the Sith, what his main motivations are. And then, but we know where Plagueis leads to Palpatine, and we know where that leads. So Chimere is like this kind of offshoot that we have no idea about. And I'm so curious. Because like we said earlier, it's someone Chimere is someone who seems like he is truly seeking out some sort of companionship, in more than just a way of like, I want to have someone to like teach my power to. I think once he meets Osha and realizes this is someone who already has a lot of power, I want to help her like unlock it. And it's a lot of the episode, it feels like he's almost like asking her permission. Like he asks, like join me, and she says no, and he doesn't push back, and then she doesn't say no the second time. And it's, I don't know, it's just an interesting dynamic to me.
Yeah, I mean, I also think, we talked a little bit about the argument about whether or not he was manipulating her earlier. And I think that two things that really solidify that he isn't for me, beyond beyond them saying, no, he's not manipulating her, is when he asks her at the beginning of that episode, she hesitates. She doesn't just say, like, absolutely the fuck not. She's like, she waits, she thinks about it, and she's like, no. But that no to me is very much like her Jedi training, her idea that the dark side is bad and she doesn't want to do bad things. But to me, Osha is a character, and I was on a show the other day. This is live and I can edit it later. It was just white men and me. And
don't edit it. Talk your shit. Talk your shit.
No, listen, it really didn't sit right with me that I was over here like, oh my God, Oshamir, I'm all into Oshamir. And one of the men on the panel was like, Osha is the most selfish character ever. Good luck, Chimere. And I was like, first of all, I really don't like the way you're saying that about a black woman as a white man. Like, that seems icky, the way that you're phrasing that. Also, what show were you watching? Because that is absolutely not Osha's character at all. And to reduce her to some choices that she made to benefit herself after years and years and years of like quietly suffering, I think that's pretty fucking gross, actually. So I fought with him a little bit, and then I went to the DMs and I was like, but no, I think that she has had this darkness inside of her a little bit her entire life. And I think that that's very beautifully demonstrated throughout the entire season. And I think that she has perceived that for a really long time as bad, just because of the Jedi training, just because of like, you're not supposed to feel anger, you're not supposed to feel grief, you're not supposed to feel guilt or anything like that. And then, so she hesitates. It's not oh yeah, let me think about it. Like, no, there's no way in hell. It's like, no, there's a part of me that actually wants to believe you and does trust you, but I have this training in my brain that's like, no, you shouldn't do this. And so then when it finally gets to the, we talked about it earlier, when May's like, what do you want? who has asked her that question? 2 people, right?
Yeah.
Her mother, who was going to allow her to go with the Jedi, and May at the end. And she's finally able to make that choice. So I don't think that that's that scene. But then also, like, I don't even know. I'm going on a tangent. I can talk about these 2.
Yeah.
But I just think that May, or that Osha rather, she, just the whole scene where she kills Soul, and first of all, she could have just taken his saber and cut his head off, or stabbed him through the heart, or done it the easy way. But she's like, no, you have been the cause of my suffering for 16 years. I'm going to make this very slow and very painful. I think that's beautiful. And then she bleeds his Kyber, and like that entire scene. And then the way that she is met with compassion, both from Kymir and May. She's done this awful thing. She's committed murder, something she didn't think she had it within herself to do. And May's like, are you okay? Like, I'm here for you. I love you. I'm your sister. We're finally, and then Kymir obviously offering her support, and she's like in the fit of her rage, and she points a saber at him, and that's just their dynamic. But I know what I was going to say. I guess what I was going to say is, we know from Manny, because he's a blabbermouth, that they filmed a kiss, which is
so funny
crazy to me.
Who wants to storm Lucasfilm? Just kidding. I want to see it though.
Give me a personal invite,
please. I will not. This was not a threat, Lucasfilm. If you're watching, I'm so sorry. I just want to see it. I will accept the personal invitation to.
I will leave my phone at the door. I will never talk about it. Just let me come.
I'll sign an NDA. I will sell my firstborn.
Oh my god, y'all. I drank an entire bottle of wine that on the finale night. I was
yeah, we were having quite a few rum cocktails, like amongst my friends. But one thing I wanted to say, I thank you for saying all of that about like Osha and her experience on the show. One of the things that really resonated with me throughout the course of the season, which is how I know like Black women were absolutely in the writer's room for this show, is like the validation and uplifting of like Black women being able to be angry without them being treated, having that being treated with like the same nuance and care as white men always get to be treated with when they are angry, like as protagonist characters. It was so important for me for her to be able to be angry in the way that she was in that show and in that finale, and to have her feelings and her choices be particularly uplifted by the 2 other Black women on the show. Her sister and her mother were so intentional. Those were deeply intentional choices. And it just isn't something that we often see treated with the level of care in the writer's room, that I think, it is warranted. And, I'm really interested in doing sort of a deeper analysis at some point, between how people react to the like the very valid and real anger of characters like May, like Osha, if we're going to use another show as an example, Riva, and how like all of those moments and situations of anger have as much validity to them as, you know, all the excuses people will make for like Anakin, you know, and many other, I mean, the list would go on and on if I sat here and named all the like white men in Star Wars who are allowed to be mad.
No, but it's so valid, and I just it didn't, you know, when I just to be, you never know, right? Like we started this project with with the intent of highlighting voices that don't get the attention that they deserve in the fandom a lot of the time, and you know, it's something that I've really felt myself since we started Yap Sesh was, you know, I've been invited on shows and, you know, most of the time it goes fine. And I try my hardest. I try really hard not to go on shows where, you know, there's something that I should be concerned. You know, I try to do my research, but there are times when you just don't see it coming and there's nothing that can prepare you for it. And so when that came up, there were two moments in that experience where I was like, you know, they credited Dave Filoni for the Acolyte, and I was like, that's weird.
No.
And then it was going fine for a while, and then they said, you know, just the phrase Osha is the most selfish character in this show, it just didn't sit right with me, and I was just like, I can't. Yeah, I mean, like you said, Natasha, what are your thoughts about Anakin? Like, tell me what you perceive. Is he guilty? Because Osha, and it's not just Osha. I think there's just this show and the way that the dark side and the light side are portrayed, and the morality surrounding this incident that happened on Brendock. I cannot fathom using that word to describe this character when I understand her on a level that I have not been able to relate to so many other characters, simply because I am a woman and I have been told not to feel things. I have been told to hold things in. I've been told not to speak out when I feel that I have been wronged in some way. And, you know, then and I'm white, so I don't have the experience of being a person of color and understanding that aspect of her character. And that's something you brought up the first time that you were on the show, and you gave a really beautiful quote about it that I ended up using in our promo for the episode. But you know, it's like it touches me. It makes me feel really great about Leslie, about the show. It's a story that she wanted to tell, and the thought that she had to include, you know, as much as she could as a white woman as well. But it's like, gosh, wow.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I absolutely. And I think one of my hopes for how, you know, wonderful it was to see characters of, you know, different backgrounds, like just like diversity of character, and the diversity of like the writers room. I'm really hoping that this leads to more of this in the rest of Star Wars, because to your point that you're making about Leslie, what is really amazing about her as a showrunner is she knows she needs to she has the main characters plural as like Black women in this show. She knows she needs to put Black women in the writer's room to properly tell this story. And that's what she made sure to do. You know, she knows that she can't be the sole person creating that narrative, because there are things, because of her lived experience, she is not going to be able to tell in the way that she needs to. And I think that is the beauty of having a showrunner who really gets that. And you know, one of my ongoing and continual frustrations around Star Wars generally and how it's created is that it is just centered from like the same lens over and over and over and over again, you know? And I think that, you know, I don't think that, like, you know, Obi-Wan is a perfect show, and I think that there are some narrative choices I would have made different, you know, I would have done differently. And they really didn't have women in the writers' room for Obi-Wan either, you know. But I think that I could still tell the difference between that show and the majority of what we get in the Star Wars, because like you can tell it was done with the lens of treating women like they were you know, entitled to their emotions in a very, you know, specific kind of way. And women were allowed to be front and center in the story in a way that we don't often get to see. And I am really hopeful that between shows like Obi-Wan, and shows like The Acolyte, that we are going to see some kind of significant shift in how the storytelling is developed and diversified in the future. But yeah, I'm just like really proud of Leslie for this project, and I'm so excited for any future possible work she gets to do in the Star Wars sandbox from here.
Yeah. No, I completely agree, and I think that, you know, I do not care to entertain the mob of the minority. I will say it's a vocal minority. I do not care to entertain their bullshit. But you know, I think you're absolutely right, and I think that Reva is a great example because I just love Reva. I think she is a fantastic character, and I am waiting and waiting and waiting for them to do something else with her. And yeah, I think that, you know, a lot of the conversation around representation is, it's woke. Blah, 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 blah. No, actually, I don't. The more that we talk about this and the more that I settle on my feelings about The Acolyte, you know, I made a tweet the other day and I stand by it. I said, I was like, The Acolyte is better than the Skywalker saga. Yeah, I stand by it. For me personally, this show struck a chord in my soul that I haven't felt before in this way. And I think that's why. I think I was able to, like, of course there are characters in the Star Wars universe. I wouldn't love Star Wars as much as I do and have my entire life if it weren't for certain stories and certain characters that resonated with me. But this is the very first time in my entirety of my life as a Star Wars fan, which is my entire life, where I was able to go, this was written by a woman. This is a person who has my experiences, who understands and sees the world the way that I walk through it. And it feels more real. It feels I can connect the characters that are in Acolyte to people I know. Like Yord, who is a man. I have never felt as like, you know, anybody who was like, I hate Yord, I felt this like overwhelming sense of like, I need to defend the Yord lovers because I see Yord in so many people that I love dearly.
Yeah.
And these characters are just, it's just different. And, you know, in that same vein, on the opposite side of it, something I've never been able to connect to in Star Wars is, you know, a lot of people point to the fight between Anakin and Obi-Wan in Revenge of the Sith and that relationship and how, you know, I've seen so many men say, you know, that's a brotherhood, that's a love that they had for each other that's falling apart, and that's the most emotional scene in Star Wars. I've never been able to relate to that. I don't have a brother. I am not a man. That is something that I fully recognize as a valid interpretation of that scene and that relationship. But now it's my turn and I'm going, oh, no. These are women, and they are women who have been gaslit their entire lives.
Yeah.
finally being told it's okay to feel the way that you feel, and you have a choice and you have a say in the way that your life is going to go. And it matters. It really fucking does. But Brooke?
Yeah, I mean, we've been yapping for a long time.
Yeah.
I guess we can wrap up with just like final thoughts, hopes and dreams for a season 2. Yeah, just like last thoughts about, could be the finale as a whole, the show as a whole, etc., etc. I got distracted playing a game on my phone, I'm not gonna lie.
I love that for you.
Wait, which
But I was
game?
listening.
What
Like,
game was
the
it?
You have to like sort these little like colors. It was like not me being distracted. I was fully engaged in like listening to everything that you said, and I was like, yes. But then it came time
I'm
for me to talk.
obsessed.
It came time for my turn, and I was like, I actually have nothing to add here, but I agree with what you all said.
And
I
as
guess,
Brooke said, the yapping is what we came for. Yeah, that is what happens on this
the yapping
podcast.
is
And I had Billy pour me a very tall glass of wine before the show started. So
amazing.
Yapping is what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, I guess I will invite myself to go first for my final thoughts. Overall, like I was excited for the show because it felt so surreal, like playing Jedi Survivor the first time and having them talk about the High Republic stuff and like seeing High Republic robes in like as close to live action as we had gotten thus far. I was like, it felt so surreal. So I was very excited for this show from the beginning. I love the morally gray shit. I'm a morally gray girly. I love the morally gray men. I love the black and not the gray in between the black and white. So I was very excited for them to explore like the darker parts of Star Wars. And I love that they showed this aspect of it in this way where it was not directly shown in a light that was like what these characters are doing are inherently good or inherently bad. There was a lot of that gray in between, and there's so much discussion to be had about the choices of all of these characters, especially like you said, we could talk forever about Soul as a character. I think it's so interesting to have a Jedi do explicitly selfish things, but also understand like where he was coming from. And the other night when we were talking about this on the Acolyte for Change live stream, I was like, oh my God, am I going to talk about The Last of Us? Because Soul is reminding me a lot of Joel Miller right now.
I could see that.
Choices.
Yeah, I didn't even.
Yeah, I literally had the epiphany while we were watching it, and I was like, wow, I have to talk about this because I think like you can understand the motivations of Soul and why he did the way, and understand and have empathy for him as a character, but then also them being able to display the grief and the anger and the frustration that the other side feels with Osha, or like in The Last of Us with Ellie, feeling justified in that anger because they feel like there was a choice taken away from them and information hidden from them. It's just so good. Anyway, so season 2, that's what I want. I don't care what, I want them to kiss on the mouth.
Listen, I'm just saying, if they already kissed in a cut that we didn't see, I have to go out on a limb here and say we're gonna see sex in Star Wars for the first time. Sorry.
Yeah, we absolutely are. Like we are going to see it.
I don't think that, like, okay, yes, we have romance in Star Wars. It's always been there. We've always, there's always been passion to some degree. We have never, ever had a confirmation first of all, I'm gonna say it. I think that the hand touch was actually hotter than a kiss would have been in that moment. And I absolutely love the way that they were like, watching the comments, like, like, for me as a Raylo going, okay, we went from the hand touch to the hand hold, like, that's hot. But yeah, no, for all parties involved to be like, oh yeah, this is romantic, we love the romance, we're going to give the people what they want, they're gonna go there.
Mm-hmm.
They will.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't even know what I was gonna say. I'm just sitting here waiting for Natasha's 17-part series about why they hate Soul.
I love the character of Soul, but I am also his number one hater. Yeah, I can maybe close out by just saying, again, obviously I love the show overall. I think, again, just like Brooke, you were saying, it is just like a very deeply nuanced experience beyond sorry, I'm looking at the chat.
Can I just say, AO3 is gonna have a field day with this voyeurism hashtag. Let me just put that out there.
I can't. I don't want to put them on blast, but my like current RP partner keeps sending me art of Plagueis, or like saying like, oh, like a scene will happen and they'll be like, oh, Plagueis, like Plagueis is in the corner over here with a cigarette going. Oh,
oh man, yeah, TikTok is really having a time the next 2 years. Anyway, okay, let me focus. I really loved how nuanced all of the characters were. I really liked the fact that the show really made you sit in like a lot of discomfort. I really loved that. I think that this show did a good job of giving us sort of like a diverse tone of things, like I feel like we still had to have silly, goofy Star Wars times, while also having a show that was just like very like emotionally complex, and that grief was really at the center of the entire story. And as like a grief girly, I was just like, yum 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 yum, I love this. I like love this, like, as like a premise of storytelling. And like, again, just like the fact that Osha's grief was the driving force in bleeding that lightsaber, the same lightsaber that was used to kill her mother, is just like poetry. So I just think that the writing decisions were absolutely fantastic and delicious in this entire show, and I am really, really, really excited to see where else this is going to go. And like, yeah, and again, I think that until we do get another season, I'm really excited about like all of the fanfic, the art, the videos, and all the things that people are going to be making between now and then. I'm excited to rewatch this show probably about 1 billion times before season 2 gets here. And yeah, I'm just really grateful that Disney Lucasfilm did take a chance on this show. And I am hopeful that next time they give a little bit more creative control to Leslie. So she's able to do all the things that she wants to do, because it was very we didn't get into that in this episode or in in this session, but yeah, I feel like there were choices I could feel that were studio made or studio influenced, and I'm hoping that Leslie has proven that she should be able to like have way more creative control over like this project.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Do you want to highlight Chris's question again?
Yes. So I will say, however, before I do that, I'm going to highlight this other comment of Chris because I don't know if we have said it on Yapsesh, but Yapsesh, we are certified Basil haters over here.
You guys
hot take. And it's not even like Basil as a character. I just feel, and normally I love the silly little guys. The silly little Star Wars guys is like what makes Star Wars for me. I don't know. There's something about Basil that like with the tone of the show just like didn't do anything for me. And I'm so sorry because like normally I would be all over that shit. Like I would love him, you know, like he's goofy and he is the epitome of Star Wars, right? Because Star Wars has to have some element of like kid friendly camp. And he fits those things, but there's for some reason I just want to like I don't know. I wish he wasn't in the show. I don't know.
Yeah. For those of you who are not familiar with our shtick on Yapsesh, Brooke and I have been friends for many years, and we have realized more recently than I care to admit that we are basically the same person living in two different versions. She tweeted on her private Twitter the other day, like, I hate Basil. It was right after we recorded an episode where our guest was like, I love Basil, and I didn't say anything, and Brooke didn't say anything, and I immediately texted her and I was like, thank you, I fucking hate
And it's weird, like I really don't know why, because he is why I love Star Wars. Like I love because part of the reason why I didn't love Andor is such a good show. I mean, not without its criticisms, but my biggest criticism why I like when people look at me like I have three heads when I'm like I think The Mandalorian is my favorite Star Wars show is because it's silly and goofy and camp and it's got your silly little aliens in it. And so we got Basil, and then I was like, I don't know what there's something about it that just like didn't click for me with the context of everything else in the show. But it's fine. He's cute and he had some funny moments. I liked when he was like gonna throw hands with May. But I don't know. Anyway.
Wow.
I will say I do have go ahead.
Oh no. All I was gonna say is like I am not one of the people that will die on the hill of Basil. I think that he's a cutie pie, and but mostly what I care about when it comes to Basil is him messing up like Soul's day, like, in the last episode. That was really the only time I was really like, yeah. So to Chris's comment, I will be busting him out of jail. That's fine. I will break him out.
Oh my god.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that like I do appreciate that they had a silly little guy and they actually gave him an arc, you know, like it wasn't just a one-off silly little guy, like they didn't forget about him. But yeah. But I do want to highlight Chris's other comment because I already said my piece about Raylo versus Oshamir, which is, you know, it's cemented you were there, you saw it, it's been cemented. The other thing I have to say about Oshamir is I have not been persuaded or convinced or invested enough in 10 years to write a fan fiction, and I have an idea for one, and I'm trying to do it. And I've been brewing on this for a couple weeks now. I really want to do it, but I need inspiration. I don't have a playlist for them, so I'm excited for this question because I think the only way that I can even attempt this is to have a playlist for these two. So, Brooke, do you have an answer?
I don't have a solid answer to this, but I also have not done a lot of thinking of it. I just looked up, so I love Baldur's Gate 3, and I may or may not have playlists that I have made for all of the characters that I have romanced in my playthroughs, and I was like, I'm gonna look through my Astarian romance playlists to see if there are any similar songs, because I feel like it's a similar vibe of like, I want to make this person worse, but also better at the same time. So I don't have a solid answer.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, Chris. I too don't have enough. First of all, I don't want to just come up with a song on the fly.
Right,
I
right.
want to be thoughtful and really think about this. I am a big fan of creating playlists for characters. So I love the challenge. I feel like I will be thinking about this throughout the week. So expect
Please
an
send
update.
it to me.
Yes,
Send it to me.
I shall. But yeah, so far as I've gotten in terms of music is going through Cowboy Carter and identifying which song belongs to which character. I'm in the process of creating that Twitter thread right now, by the way. TBD. But yeah, I like the challenge. What's a Oshimir song? I'll hit you back.
Yeah, I wish Savi was still here, because she tweeted something, or someone tweeted something about some Olivia Rodrigo song where the lyrics were like very.
No, it was Swagman. Swagman had a song for them.
Swagman responded to someone made a thread of like what Olivia Rodrigo songs the Acolyte characters would be, and then Swagman responded to it with something about, I think it was Chimera. I don't remember if it was Chimera and Osha as a couple, but like, and then I saw Savi had quoted it with the lyrics, and I was like, wow. So I guess right now, whatever song that is, because I can't remember, that would be my answer. But
someone said Logical. I think the song is called Logical.
Mm-hmm.
Good to know.
Ooh. All right, Chris.
Good to know.
All right.
Oh, wait.
All right. Okay. Well, this has been a very lively and wonderful discussion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so happy that we did it. And I'm happy we did it live for a change.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here, Natasha. We love you. We love when you're on the show.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell everybody where we can find you?
Sure. Well, you can find me on Twitter, where I will be posting this playlist at some point over the next week or so at NKNAPPER. And you can also find me on TikTok at NMKNAPP. I'm still kind of figuring out what my like final breakdown video is going to be about my like opinions on the Acolyte. Every time I try to record one, it's like 10 million years long, and I'm like, okay, I need to tighten it up. So, but I'll be posting something soon in the next few days. But yeah, those are where you can find me.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everybody for watching. We are going to try to find a way to download this and upload it to Spotify so that our listeners can hear this. And if you're listening to it after the live, thank you so much. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the Yap Sesh podcast, as well as check us out on our social media, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. And we will be back in a couple days for our next main episode with Isabella Amidala.
Hell yeah. All right. Thanks, y'all. And we will yap with y'all again soon.
Bye, y'all.